Hi everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. Excuse me. Happy Easter to all of you. Kalyanastasi. I'm in the Grand Salon, as you can see, which is where I usually have my lunch. And I've got a lousy cold, but the filming that I referred to before that was necessitating 10-hour days is now complete for the moment, so that's good. I would not, in my current condition, have been able to keep going. So luckily, the cold didn't come on until after. Okay, so we're up to the 22nd of April for our recap. The 21st of April, well, it was a very full day for our friend. He spent the afternoon with Maria and Gulia, the evening with Coco, including they went to the theater. And I forgot to mention before that, there was no secrecy. Now that he was in Paris, they were all the time at the Ritz, having dinner at the Ritz Grill, and now at the theater together. And then after that, Coco dropped him off at Maria's place for a Russian party with a son of the famous writer Lev Tolstoy singing gypsy songs very well, as Dmitri tells us. Our cast today, well, we have two small groups of people. The monarchists surrounding Dmitri, the ones who preferred him to Kirill, and then his cousins, the Vladimirovichi. So here we go. 22nd April 1921, Friday, Paris, 76 Rue Miromesnil. A lot of people crowded into my place in the morning. I had called an immediate meeting with Dubinsky Sr., Gulevich, Galevsky, and Pete Polovtsov. I summoned them primarily at the advice of Maria. She had told me that in Paris they were already talking about me going on a spree, saying I was no longer interested in affairs, that it was not worth working with me, etc., beyond which I had already withdrawn, having a grudge against Galevsky because of Berlin. And while in Monte Carlo, I had received a letter from Hartmann informing me of his decision not to work with Galevsky anymore on monarchical matters. I got a little angry because of these rumors, saying that these people think I don't do much. And so that morning I announced to all of them that my decision remained the same as it had been 2 years ago, i.e., that I won't participate in a race to the throne with Kirill, and will never agree to the role of official pretender without first witnessing the abdication of my cousins. And if Polovtsov and Galevsky find that I'm not doing enough, and that people are increasingly drawn to Kirill, then that's fate, and I won't lift a finger to oppose it. However, those rumors, as it then turned out, were greatly exaggerated, probably with the goal of provoking me into some kind of gesture. But they won't get such gestures from me for the time being. I snapped at Galevsky a little for his treatment of Hartmann. I said that in Hartmann we have, if not a genius, then certainly a person devoted both to the idea and to me. Okay, very interesting, very interesting. And I've cut it a little short. I'm going to do the final paragraph of this diary entry tomorrow because it switches gears entirely and talks about what Dmitri did socially that day. So we have two relatively long paragraphs devoted, finally, after a long hiatus, to what was going on with him politically. And he called this meeting interesting that it was at Maria's advice. She'd been hearing the rumors, and it was something he hadn't made up his mind to do himself, but Maria, advised him to do it, maybe pushed him into it. And that was, I would say, fairly typical. Dmitri tended to be a little more what's the word? A little more inert. Maybe not going quite that far. But anyway, it was probably a good idea. And maybe you recognize these four men as the core members of Dmitri's Information Bureau. And I've been asking all along since he got back to Paris whether it was now defunct, whether there still was an information bureau, and whether Dmitri had any interest in it. And after reading this, I'm inclined to say no. He didn't want rumors spreading about him being not doing anything, but he didn't really want to do anything, did he? He's telling them that he's not going to participate anymore, essentially, in the competition with Kirill. So the Information Bureau hadn't really come into existence, founded by Dmitri as it was, in order to gather intelligence on Kirill. It was supposed to be gathering intelligence on what was going on in Russia and how other states, other countries were interacting or not interacting with Russia and what their attitude was toward Russia. But now it seems that it all comes down to who's going to be the pretender to the throne. Dmitri at least uses the word pretender. He doesn't say guardian of the throne or emperor in exile, as Kirill already had, apparently. So he was a man of uneven reputation, let's face it. During the war, after his disastrous his experience at the Battle of Kaushin, when it was all devastating blood and guts and he lost many friends, and he was right there to witness it all and luckily survived. Hartman, who he mentions here, was wounded. At any rate, after that, yeah, he had kind of started not doing anything except being with Nicholas at headquarters, and he wanted to influence things at headquarters. He didn't want to go back to the front, but he wanted to influence things at headquarters and put Nicholas on the right path, so to speak. And he tried very hard to dissuade Nicholas from replacing Nikolai Nikolaevich, and he hadn't seen himself as somebody doing nothing. But whenever he was on leave in either Moscow or Petrograd, yeah, he was carrying on with women, he was gambling, he was spending a lot of his time at the club, the yacht club, and people looked at him and didn't see somebody who was doing anything. So there's always this mixed reputation with Dmitri. He's a playboy on the one hand, and he's a serious person on the other hand who really wants to play an important role. And, it always hung in the balance, depending on how he was behaving and what he was doing at any given time, whether people perceived him as a playboy or as a serious figure. And the former certainly, I would say, predominated, not because it was necessarily accurate. I mean, we saw him in Monte Carlo behaving like anything but a playboy. By and large, there was that one incident toward the end, and there was definitely gambling, but he wasn't, by and large, he wasn't out there leading the high life in the sense that a playboy would. Anyway, he's angry at these rumors, but he, in so many words tells them, yes, I'm finished. I'm not going to race to the throne with Kirill. And hitherto, when he'd been in Paris before the whole trip with Coco, and especially before what happened in Berlin, he was trying to make sure that Kirill was not the pretender to the throne. He absolutely was. But now he's withdrawing from that. And there's just no way to ignore the fact that what happened in Berlin was as big a turning point in Dmitri's life as what happened in December 1916 with Rasputin. It changed his whole trajectory. And so now he doesn't, outright want to say, okay, it's over. But that's basically what he's saying. It's fate. Whether that's a cop-out or whether that's what he really believed, it's fate, and I won't lift a finger to oppose it. So, they calmed him down a little and said, yeah, these rumors, they're exaggerated, they're provocations. And it was always possible to calm Dmitri down. He wasn't a stubborn person in that sense, that he would refuse to listen and to acknowledge that he was wrong about something, at least partly. And again, as I've said before, I think the reason why he gets so upset and so angry about these things is because he knows they're true. He knows that he's not doing anything, and that he's more or less checked out of this whole thing. And that makes it all the more galling to hear people saying that out loud. He's not at peace with it himself, is what I'm trying to get at. And indeed, within 2 years of this, by 1923, he will have accepted the role of Kirill's representative in Paris. And his son, Paul, could never understand how that came about. And I don't really understand it either, although, yeah, I guess I shouldn't say that, because he was so finished by what happened in Berlin. But, Paul assured me that Dmitri really loathed Kirill. Always. So that was quite a sad thing, I think, on his part, that he was willing to swallow that and go along with Kirill anyway, because part of him still did really want that important role. It's just that he himself wasn't a leader, and so he was only going to get it by attaching himself to Kirill. Anyway, we'll see more about that later. Also, about Hartmann. So I'm not sure if we've brought Hartmann up before. An important figure in Dmitri's life, Boris Hartmann. He was the commander of Dmitri's regiment, the Horse Guard. So he was Dmitri's commander during the war. And after he'd left the Horse Guards before the war was over, he ended up in Central Asia, and he ended up being on hand to visit Dmitri a couple of times in Persia, and to try and give him some advice about what he should be doing as a Russian officer. And Dmitri would always remain loyal to Hartmann. My impression is that Hartmann, well, in Russian, of course, I should point out, it's Gartman with a G, but apparently he wasn't terribly bright and not very tactful, is the impression that I get, because there would always be trouble around Hartmann. And there would be, again, when Dmitri was, even as late as when he was Schatzalp, he was really involved with the Horse Guards Association, and Hartmann, people were always wanting to get rid of him, or to put him in a less responsible role, because apparently he wasn't the brightest, and he wasn't particularly a useful person as they saw it. I didn't know the man. I shouldn't say that, but all Dmitri says, well, he's not a genius, but he's a good man. He's devoted to the idea. That's an interesting word that Dmitri is using there, just idea. Sort of on a grand scale, it makes it sound like, but I think he just means the monarchical idea. And he's devoted to me, and in his own way. As I said, Dmitri may not have been devoted to Hartmann, but he was devoted to he was loyal to him. So yeah, there's a little bit of grandeur here, a little bit of haughtiness. He's devoted to me, and I'm going to take these men to task, call them, summon them, and take them to task. But, again, he was willing to to see that he shouldn't have been so angry, and it was not as big a deal as he thought it was. And yeah, anyway, maybe I'm reading too much into all of this, but what do we have next time? Well, as I said, we have what Dmitri did that day after this big meeting with Coco, with Maria, back to the theater, and with another interesting person, an artist. So I'll come back for that. And yeah, I don't know how much time Dmitri spent in this room. Here's the fireplace behind me. It was a place where the patients went to, to just socialize a little and read and relax. It wasn't really the scene of the big events that happened when they celebrated Christmas or they celebrated not Easter, but when they celebrated Christmas or New Year's Eve and had big events. That was always in the restaurant next door. They shut it down to tourists, and they did the sanatorium, the big sanatorium events there, and Dmitri always went to them when he could, but he always went back and wrote in his diary how sordid they were. But anyway, undoubtedly he spent time in this room with the people that he made friends with, even though he wasn't being terribly social while he was here. So, yeah, come back next time, and happy Easter again, and I'll see you then. Bye.